Welcome back to B2B Growth. My name is James Carberry, and I'm joined today by Chris Walker, the CEO of Refine Labs. Now, Chris wrote something on LinkedIn a few weeks ago that blew up. It looks like it got over 1,500 people engaging with it. And it was about the difference between demand generation and lead generation. So we're going to be diving into that in this episode. But Chris, I have been consuming a ton of your content on LinkedIn. It's clear that you know what the heck you're talking about when it comes to this stuff. But for listeners that maybe haven't heard your other episodes that you've done with Logan, you joined him on episode 1147 and again on episode 1234. Give us a little background about how you came to know so much about revenue optimization and all the stuff that you've been writing about on LinkedIn.
Yeah, first off, that is a ton of episodes. So kudos to you and happy to be back for the third time and first time with you. The last two were with Logan. So it's an interesting career progression for me. I think a lot of people that would get into marketing would kind of like study something and then just jump in as a marketing associate or whatever and learn that way. And my career path was quite different. I started in engineering and then moved to product management. And in product management, the companies I worked at, you owned the P&L for that product line, everything. So working with engineering, pricing, positioning, distribution, promotion, all that different stuff. And then finally moved into a more traditional marketing downstream comms role. And for the past 5 years, spent time in the venture-backed kind of space with fast-growing companies. And but the foundation that I was created in the first 5 years of my career gave me just like a different perspective on how to do marketing. And so when I got to the company I was at, like they didn't have a demand gen function. They didn't really know what demand gen was. It was purely like sales driven and a traditional marketing company. I think a lot of people would resonate with this, like trade shows, brochures, sales enablement, like anything regarding helping the sales team sell was basically the marketing team's job. And so I think that I do demand generation uniquely because nobody taught me how to do it. I built it inside of a company that didn't know how. And so when I tested things, like some people told me to write ebooks, and then I had some people write ebooks and I promoted them. And I just watched that the close rates on the people that downloaded the ebooks was less than 0.1%. And I just decided that is not worth the effort. And then I started producing content and then I started running ads on it. And so I just kind of like through experimentation and doing, not listening to someone that told me what to do, created a very unique way of doing it that I think a lot of people would benefit from.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are benefiting from it based on the engagement that you're getting and just the way that you're slicing and dicing all of the different content. That's something that we're super passionate about here. And I know that you and Logan have talked about it before, so I won't hit that point on the with a hammer too much, but just seeing how you're putting together these in-person events, you're turning them into 7 or 8 different micro videos, and it's just been really cool to see the stuff that you've been doing with Gaetano and with I think Justin Welsh. I watched the video the other day. So you're doing it right, man. So I want to dive in and get into this. Get into the
something
topic
in there. Just something really interesting.
Yeah,
I think people would benefit from. So the things that I'm doing right now for myself and my own company, I've been doing for brands for 5 years. And so like, I think that's a really interesting perspective is like, I was creating content and running ads on it and distributed it on social media. Like that's how I learned. I did it for a medical device company and then a couple other growth stage companies. And now I do it for myself and a lot of other companies. And another thing that it's been kind of interesting, and I think this will like hit people, is that it's super interesting that my company with 5 people produces more content every day than most $50+ million businesses.
Yeah.
And so I think if you work in one of those companies, it's like, maybe that's the way that somebody finally says it to give you the push to try and think about how to do it. Because like, it doesn't cost a lot. It just takes a commitment to the strategy and a dedication to understand and patience, which a lot of companies do not support. A lot of companies, if I started doing this, what I'm doing right now, which was I started doing it back in like, I don't know, April or July on LinkedIn, and most executives would have shut it down before it ever had the chance to get the results that it's bringing today. And the funny thing about like what's happening right now is that you carry it with you. Like the 21,000 followers that I have that I'm super grateful that they get a lot of benefit out of the content. Like one day that might be 100. And when that is 100, like I've seen the impact scale in a different way than running ads on an ebook ever would.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I really want to push people to challenge themselves on the way that they've been doing things. And if there's a better way. One of the, another just detail that I saw is that when we were running the ebook campaigns, the goal of running content is for people to consume it. And so we were running ebook campaigns, running paid ads. People were downloading the ebook, sometimes for like $10 a registration. They would get pushed from Facebook or LinkedIn into HubSpot, run through automation, deliver the content by email. And then when you actually look at the click-throughs on the email and the consumption of the ebooks,
next to nothing.
Like 10% click-through. So like 1 out of 10 that you're actually paying for is actually even getting to the ebook. And then if you look at the consumption, like they're not actually consuming it. So you're just paying a lot of money to collect email addresses.
Yep.
And so, yeah, really hoping that if you haven't audited that entire process, because I audit enough SaaS companies and I know that most companies are doing it that way. If you haven't looked at the data for those couple key metrics that I just pointed out, I'd encourage you to do it. And it might take you in a different direction than where you're going right now.
So Chris, this is what we're going to get into the lead gen versus demand gen conversation in a second, but you touched on something there that's, I mean, a lot of what we're building here around our collective show offering has to do exactly with what you're saying. And the thing that I've been noticing is, so in your case, for example, you have a very distinct perspective. You've got a unique way of thinking about how marketing works, how revenue like optimization should work. You take a stand on things. Are the companies that you're working with, is it typically the CEO? Is it usually their CMO? Like, are you building the strategy around a single person, or are you looking at multiple executives in the organization and building content around each of them as individuals, and picking out what are the things that they're doing differently, or the things that they're saying that are going to get the kind of reaction that your content's been getting on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so it's funny. Predominantly, we market through the brand, through the logo, not through a human. And you can do the exact same thing. Like a logo can have the exact same impact and thought leadership, arguably more than one single person, if it's architected the right way. There are certain scenarios where the CEO has a specific perspective or an amount of credibility based on their past career experience where they can speak in that manner. And when those cases happen, we certainly take advantage of it, and it works on LinkedIn. We architect strategies for executives that are similar to what I do and see great results. But for the most part, it's through the brand. And so I think that people that get confused that you must go through personal brands in order for this type of stuff to happen, like, I think in my experience that it actually works better when it comes through a brand, because you can leverage a lot of different people, and there's like a combination, right? So like if you're going to interview people as a brand, and you're going to go and interview thought leaders or customers or whatever, like you might have one single interviewer that starts to attract attention, then you can start to siphon that out into an own personal brand. But you could arguably, like, $1 billion company that's selling into 10 verticals should have 10 hosts and host 10 shows.
Yeah.
But they host 0 shows with 0 hosts.
You're exactly right. Yeah, that's really what we've been doing, creating the brand for each of our different collective shows. So B2B sales show, B2B growth show, we've got multiple hosts for those shows. So we're really building individual personal brands under the umbrella of the show at a high level. And the reason we call it collective thought leadership is because you're leaning on the collection of all of those different points of view and thoughts to actually go a whole lot further, a whole lot faster, because it's not just you climbing a mountain by yourself. You've got 6, 7, 8 other co-hosts that are also lifting kind of the banner of that show and the content that they're bringing to the table as well. So far it's been going really, really well, but that's interesting. I have not heard a lot of people talk about the idea of the brand itself being more powerful than a personal brand. That's really interesting perspective.
I think a lot of people, at least if they're really paying attention on LinkedIn, the reason that people probably think that way is personal profiles over-index on LinkedIn over company pages. The reason being is that there's a couple core reasons in the dynamics of the platform why that happens. One is that companies cannot go and proactively make connections. They must, it's reactive followers, and it's hard to get a lot of followers. The easiest way for a person to get more followers is to go and connect with a bunch of people, and then you have more followers and more people see the content and the snowball starts working. Companies can't do that. The second thing is that I just believe, just on experience, that the algorithm deprioritizes company posts right now. That might change over time. But if you're in like a heavy content marketing, content driven brand, a corporate brand, like you should be running paid. Like LinkedIn is one distribution channel. There are a lot of channels, right? So like if you're running content, email, Facebook ads, Instagram story ads, LinkedIn organic through employees profiles, podcast, YouTube, like all those different places are in play. I do believe that personal brands over-index on LinkedIn organic, but that is not the same dynamic across all those other channels. Like,
and so do you advise that companies put dollars on their company LinkedIn, like running it? Because I know you talk a lot about just putting dollars behind content and not necessarily having a call to action behind it. We're going to get into that a little bit when we talk about the difference between lead gen and demand gen. But do you advise companies to do that on LinkedIn, even though it is such an expensive ad platform?
So there's no black and white answer to this. I think there's a lot of different variables that play into it. Just like your overall revenue efficiency, the average contract value of your product, who you're trying to reach. Like there's a lot of companies, we don't do any advertising on LinkedIn because Facebook works so much better and it's 10 to 20 times less expensive. In other companies, if you're selling to CROs at companies that are 50 to 200 employees that also use Tableau, then you might want to use LinkedIn instead, right? And so I think it really depends on whether or not you can target them in other places more effectively for less cost. But in general, like the thesis is we use paid media predominantly to distribute content, not to drive conversions, because then the conversions that you do get happen organic or direct traffic, and there's way more high quality, and you create brand awareness through it and all the other things that we talk about. And so that's a strategy that I've been using for 5 years. I go in and audit companies that are doing it the other way. I just know this way works better. Yeah. So let's dive into this. So before we get into which one, you think is more effective, which I think we've already kind of let the cat out of the bag in communicating that, but how do you define both lead generation and demand generation? Yeah, so I've been talking about this a lot, and I've gotten a lot of great questions on posts or videos or live Q&As that we're doing. And so I've tried to really figure out how the most simple and effective way to communicate this is. And when it comes down to it, the way that I've found this resonating the most with people right now is it comes down to, what is your intent as a marketer? Is your intent to create a contact that then your salespeople can sell to? That's lead gen. Or is your intent to educate people or create value for people, which then drives awareness of your brand, your company, your product, and future consideration of what you do? I consider that demand gen. And so, and I would argue that the best lead gen happens because of good demand gen. Like a lead gen is an output of good demand gen, not the endpoint, if that makes sense.
Got it.
And so yeah, that's kind of the difference that I see. I hope that worked, but if you have a follow-up question.
Yeah. So what would be some activities or some examples of each of those to kind of help just allow folks to see what you're saying even more clearly?
Yeah, 100%. So I'll just break down, you can do the same tactic and have the thing be either lead gen or demand gen. So I'll give you an example. A lot of companies like to run field marketing events. Like I've been to some ABM company invites me to a nice restaurant for a lunch and learn, right? And so I show up to the lunch and learn because I have free time and it's nice. And basically it's a educational pitch of their product or category. And then right afterwards, an account executive is following up with me. That's lead gen. Okay. It's an expensive way to do lead gen. The alternative would be, we do I would consider a similar activity, which is a field marketing event where I invite a guest and I talk about something that those people care about and I interview, and then we don't follow up or use those leads to try and sell them something, but instead we film the event, and then we create a bunch of different, we have a 90-minute high production quality video that then can be chopped up on LinkedIn and put on YouTube and put on our website and sent out by email, and sound bites can get created, or we can rip it for a podcast or whatever, the things like that. And then through that education, we create awareness, and then people come to us to buy stuff, which I would consider using the same tactic, but in a demand gen execution rather than a lead gen execution. Mm-hmm. The same thing can go for ebooks or whatever tactic. It's just what are you trying to do? Are you trying to educate people, or are you trying to get people to convert so you can try and sell them something?
Yep. And so I wholeheartedly agree with kind of where you've come out on the other end of this, being that demand gen is way more effective than lead gen, because it's real. I mean, it's how you and I have both built our own businesses. We've gone all in on educating this show. I mean, B2B growth, the lion's share, 98% of the content that we talk about here has nothing to do with B2B podcasting, which is our business, because we're just pot committed to educating our ideal buyer, which is a VP of marketing at a B2B tech company with 50 plus employees. We figure out, okay, what do they want to know? That even if it has nothing to do with what we sell and what we do, we know that if we can educate them well, whenever they do want to get into podcasting, we're probably going to be their first or second call to talk about what, how we can possibly help them. So,
and now I think corporate, there's a nuance there that you mentioned that I think a lot of corporate brands miss, which is that when they create the content, it's only driven to drive people into a funnel for their product, as opposed to, let me assess my audience, let me figure out what they care about, and 98% of the things that they care about have nothing to do with you, and really go pot committed on the 98%. It's so counterintuitive. People struggle to get there, right? Like, I've been running demand gen, and I've been filming these videos and spending, travel, get someone there, videographers, like an expensive production to create a video that has nothing to do with our product. And I've gotten pushback from executives. But I know that the impact of creating that video, sending it out in an email to 100,000 people that care, watch the amount of depth you create when 1,000 people in your target market spend 90 minutes watching that video. That is where everyone is about reach. How do I create an ad and get 1 million impressions? I'm about depth. How do I get someone, if someone sits there and consumes content and gets value out of it for 90 minutes, 1,000 people that do that is much more important than 1 million people that saw your logo in an ad and scrolled right by it.
Yep.
In my view.
So clearly both you and I land on the same side of the fence, which is demand gen is far more effective going out and creating that demand by not necessarily having a call to action, or your intent is not
sales intent. Exactly.
Yeah. Your intent is not to create this piece of content so that you can hand over a lead to your sales team. Your intent is to educate the market that you're trying to educate. So demand gen coming out more effective there. Is there any room at all for lead gen? Is there a situation where that makes sense?
I mean, I personally don't use that tactic, mainly because, like, my feeling, and I think this will actually, I've never said it this way before, but I think it'd be an interesting way to look at it, is that the companies that are running lead gen prioritize quantity over quality. And I know that because you just can't cold target someone, have them convert on a lead gen form and expect them to close at any set of a high rate. Like, they were cold, and then people will convert, but I just know, like, I've done this before. You run requested demo ads on LinkedIn, you get people to fill out the form for $200 each, and you're going to send 25 leads to your sales team, and 0 of them are going to close, and you just wasted their time. And so it's not only the cost of the expense of running the ads. You get those 25 leads for $200, it's $5,000, but it's all of the wasted time for your, whatever it is, SDRs, AEs, any of that process to go and follow up with those leads and move them through a process where they're not going to close. And then lastly, the hidden cost of misalignment that's created between marketing and sales by doing that.
Yeah.
And so if you look at all of the different impacts, that is the reason why I choose not to do it that way anymore, because I've run enough experiments and I continue to fact check. So the most recent time that we've done that was in January of this year. We ran LinkedIn conversion ads, super targeted for demo, collected 20 leads at about the price that I just mentioned, and 0 of them closed in a 30-day sales cycle. So that, you know, they didn't close. And I think people only think about it directly, or they're measured in a way that incentivizes them to behave that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to go back to that measurement piece. So it was something that you mentioned actually in the post that I referred to earlier that you wrote on LinkedIn. You said that marketing teams need to stop getting measured like SDR teams. They need to stop getting measured on MQL volume and early stage funnel metrics that don't matter. So how do you propose that marketers should be measured instead?
Gosh. So I finally felt like I've figured out why people behave this way, and why marketers do the things that they do. I spend a lot of time thinking about that organizationally, because you see it at a mass scale about what's happening right now. And basically the way that I look at it in B2B companies since the beginning of time have been sales driven.
Yeah.
And no fault to them. 20 years ago, like that was the way to go to market, right? There was very little internet, very tough to reach people, not a lot of tech, like not a lot of targeting. That was the way. And over the past 5 or 10 years, marketing has become more important, but people have taken the methodology of sales and pushed it into marketing. And so if you look at like how people are scored on MQLs or meetings booked, like that's basically the same way they score an SDR team. So now they just have 2 teams that are doing the same thing in different ways. SDRs are booking meetings through cold calls or outbound or whatever they want to do. And marketing teams are running conversion-based ads or mid-funnel content ads to get the same exact outcome. Yep. And so the easiest way for me to tell whether or not a company is really doing demand gen is to look at their sales efficiency metrics between inbound and outbound. And so you should see significantly higher win rates and significantly shorter sales cycles if you're doing demand generation right and through the inbound channel.
Got it. Okay.
And so that's like a super clear and easy way to know what's going on. And most companies will see similar, if not worse, metrics on their inbound channel because of the way that they're executing, because they're doing lead gen, not demand gen.
Makes sense.
And so I kind of got lost there for a second. Could you bring me back to what the question was?
Yeah. So it's basically, you know, how do you think marketers should be measured if it's not on MQL volume and early stage funnel metrics? But I think you answered it. It's looking at what is your win rate on your inbound leads, and measuring them based on that. Did I understand that correctly?
Look, I've thought about this for 5 years. I think I have a very clear picture of how companies should do this, which is that the number one metric that marketing teams should be scored on is revenue contribution. Okay. A lot of tech vendors are pushing them to be measured on influence pipeline or something like that, which is great because for tech vendors to sell their product, because marketers can send one email and claim that they influenced that pipeline. But the real way is marketing sourced inbound revenue contribution for net new logo. So exclude expansion, exclude all that stuff. So what percentage of your revenue is coming to you versus you going to them, especially for higher ACV SaaS products specifically. A lot of companies that we go into are like 10% heavy outbound. And so if you're able to move that metric to 35% or 50%, then the dynamics of your business change. Actually, how you structure your business can change a lot. You maybe don't need so many SDRs, maybe don't need so many AEs. You can lower your customer acquisition costs, a lot of different things. So one, inbound revenue contribution as a percentage of total net new logo revenue. The second one is marketing source qualified pipeline generated. The third one is sales cycle length compared to the outbound channel. Fourth one would be win rate of marketing source versus outbound channel. And the last one would be like customer acquisition costs or CAC payback period, or another metric to know how efficient you are in spending your marketing dollars. Those are the metrics that I audit companies on, especially when you compare it inbound, outbound, and you look at like customer acquisition costs or CAC payback period. It very much exposes the declining efficiency of an outbound channel, even if marketing's not doing the right things, because you're going to see a lot of organic things happen that you have no, like, I would argue that many companies, just because they don't look at it in this level of detail, like a pretty significant portion of the revenue doesn't come either from marketing or from sales. It comes from word of mouth organic. And so because they're not measuring on that, and they don't look at it that way, it actually, if they look at blended CAC or another metric like that, it hides the differences in the effectiveness of different channels that they're doing.
Yeah, no, I love that you shared that. If you're listening to this and you haven't already rewound back to the last few minutes, look at those specific metrics that Chris just laid out and how your marketing team should be measured versus how you're currently measuring them. I think it's going to be incredibly eye-opening. It's going to be something I'm going to definitely be talking to Logan about later today, even as we try to figure out measurement. And we naturally lean toward doing the type of activity that you advocate for, Chris, but we don't do a great job of measuring results. We know that it's working because the business is continuing to grow. But I'm going to go back and listen to that part again, just so that we can get better at tightening up, actually measuring effectiveness around those metrics.
And that's how you get sales and marketing alignment, is by being aligned on the actual outcome. The caveat is that sometimes when you get marketing teams that don't do demand gen, that do lead gen, get aligned on a sales metric and then just do a bunch of sales activities. Direct mail to book meetings, like all this different stuff. So it's like you need to understand the difference between sales and marketing. I see a lot of people that are in a marketing title that are much more doing sales, conversion-based sales, that are moving people into some type of sales funnel. And so I've always found that you create sales and marketing alignment when marketing does marketing in a good way, which then contributes to the outcomes that sales is going after, which is, again, like very counterintuitive for many to think, oh, like, I'm going to produce content that has nothing to do with my product. How does that make me aligned with sales? Well, it makes you align with sales when your inbound revenue contribution goes up from 10 to 50% when you do it well. And they don't feel so much pressure to create so much of their own pipeline that wins at a lower rate and takes longer sales cycles. You're helping them achieve their goal. And so I think that's a big takeaway for people as well.
Yep. I love it. So you mentioned one other thing, Chris, that I want to touch on here. And you mentioned it in your post. So you said that a lot of marketers think they're doing demand gen when they're actually doing lead gen. Why do you think there's so much confusion around those two things?
So the first thing is that not only until recently I've been able to figure out and distinguish these myself. So like, it's nobody's fault for not understanding them, but I think that being able to frame it up that way can help a lot of people, which is why I did it. And I don't think that it's anyone's fault per se. I think that there's a couple of things that drive it, and we've kind of talked about them a little bit already, which is one, I think that a lot of people do not question the way that they do things. They just do them. And they do them because Gartner told them to do it that way, or an ABM tech vendor told them to do that way, or HubSpot told them to do it that way, so they do it, rather than just literally looking black and white at what they're doing and whether or not it's effective and whether or not there's a better way to do it. And so one is just really being open to the idea that maybe the way that you're doing things isn't the best way. And the next one that I have a lot of empathy for, because I've worked at companies like this, is that the companies don't incentivize them to do things differently. And so those are like the two core reasons. And I know, because I've gone into a lot of different companies, and whether it's as a consultant or as an employee or whatever type of engagement it is, that marketers are driven to do the things that the CRO or the CEO wants. And usually those are not the right things.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Chris, this has been incredible. I want to close it out. What is one takeaway that you want listeners to walk away with after hearing this, that you don't want them to forget?
Let's see. I don't think there's anything really like profound that I could say right now that that would really like move people to something new. But I think that one key takeaway that I'd recommend is if you're a marketer and you want your career to change, or you want your business to grow, or whatever you're trying to look at, the thing that I learned in 2016 is you need to really audit the people that you're listening to. Mm. And so for the first 5 years of my career, I had some great mentors, and I learned a lot of foundational things that I'm super, super grateful for. But when it came to driving a business and running demand generation, I was listening to the wrong things. Therefore, I was doing the wrong things. And so that's really, I think, one thing that I'd recommend is, who are you getting from your advice from? And is it the right advice?
Yeah. Is it producing the type of result that you actually want to produce?
Exactly.
Yep. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. Again, if you're listening to this, we're talking to Chris Walker today. He's the CEO of Refine Labs. He's putting out incredible content on LinkedIn pretty much every day. And so make sure that you are following him there. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, James. This was fun, man. Good to see you.